Oh, hi everyone. I thought it was time to do another historical lies video for you all. It's been a while since I've done one. And I thought something interesting was to take a subject that had been in my book, Exposing the Expositions, which only took 2 pages of time, which was 2 earlier expositions before the main Chicago Fair of 1893, which took place in Louisville, Kentucky, and in New Orleans. And one of the nice things about doing a video now is with a book, you have to stop at a certain point and say, that's enough research, the book is fine, it has to go out and you can't add any more to it. A video, in this case, now almost a year later, you can add a lot more research and a lot more new things to it. So I'm taking those 2 pages and expanding it for you to get you to start thinking again about these buildings, these structures, and these fairs. So these are 2 fairly unknown ones, and we're going to look into them a little bit and discuss assess these 2 fairs. The first is Louisville, Kentucky, which you see here, and of course Louisville now is most well known as the site of the Kentucky Derby and as the site of where Louisville Slugger baseball bats are made. But if you look at that thing in the center, that was the Louisville Exposition of 1893. It was called the Southern Exposition, and it was only supposed to happen in 1883, and this is supposed to be a temporary structure. They were supposed to have built it just for one fair, but they felt that the fair was so good and it made so much money they wanted to do it in successive years. So it ran supposedly from 1883 to 1887. But I want you to take a look at the size of this structure. It is covering 12 acres or 3 square blocks of the city, and I'll show you later the area of Louisville that it took place. So you've got this massive, that's almost like a palace, and I've seen a lot of the Medici palaces in Florence, and this thing is far bigger than that. It's got 4 internal courtyards with 4 specific giant fountains. You're seeing that to the right, you might be able to see in this photo, is a giant garden area. That was a part of the park, part of the fair. It also had elements as well to it. And I'll just let you go and see another image of it. This one is like a ticket access. And again, you've also got these very strange, I don't know if they're hard to tell if they are flags or no, they're smokestacks. So at the left edge of the exposition, you see these giant smokestacks pouring out black smoke into the sky. So you're wondering, what are they actually running in there? I guess it's coal. I guess they have coal generated plants, because this fair had the largest amount of incandescent light bulbs anywhere in the world. I think I'm going to get you an exact number, 5,000. So that particular structure had 5,000 electric lamps of Thomas Edison's newly invented incandescent lights. There were more lamps at the exposition than lamps installed in the entire of New York City. So think about that. They put more, they supposedly, for what was supposed to be a fair to last 80 days, they put in 5,000 electric lights. This is the story. But New York City, the whole of New York City, doesn't have 5,000 lights. A few other little interesting pieces and tidbits of this exposition. The President of the United States actually opened the exposition officially in 1883. So the President actually came to open a thing in Louisville, Kentucky. There was a half-scale Mayan temple constructed inside one of the buildings. Now, I don't know which, I'm still trying to find out which Mayan temple it was that they copied and put in there, but or at least say they copied. How do we know they didn't just at some point build this structure around what they're claiming is a Mayan temple? This is, of course, very close to things like the mound builders of Ohio that built like the Serpent Mound. It's not that far away from St. Louis, where you see things like sites like Cahokia and other. So it could be easy for them to just claim this temple you're seeing. They just fix it up, make it look Mayan, but it's really perhaps an ancient North American structure. I'd also had an electric trolley that encircled the entire exposition. They put a full-size southern plantation. So that park ground you're seeing in the image, in fact, I'll show you now the image of the fair, of the grounds as it is today. Here's the plan of the grounds. And this area to the right, that was set up like a southern plantation so that you could see what a cotton plantation would look like at that time. When the fairs ended in 1887 or 1888, they tore it all down. And here's a look at what you see today. You can see the size, the actual size on the block size, and the park, the plantation park is now a park in Louisville. The location, it's between 4th and 6th Streets and Park Avenue and Hill Street. But as soon as the fair was ended, they tore down the entire building and then used the stonework to build a small theater close by. I think it was called the amphitheater. I've tried to find photos of the original amphitheater in Louisville, can't track one down. The question becomes, why would you tear such a thing down? I mean, you could have easily turned this into some of the most beautiful apartments in the city. And again, they keep trying to tell you that this was a temporary building. It was only supposed to, but how temporary can the building be if you're going to use it up to 5 years in a row? This event happened for at least 4 or 5 years in a row. You can't, I don't think you would want to trust a temporary structure of this size to last for 5 years. So my guess is it wasn't temporary. Of course, the theater that they built from the destroyed blocks, that didn't last long either. The theater only lasted until 1916, when it too was torn down. And when we think about the city of Louisville itself, it's a very strange story, because Louisville was supposed to have been founded in 1778 during the American Revolution. So in the middle of the American Revolution, as colonists from the United States are fighting the British Army, they're supposed to be founding a new city in Kentucky. Is that really the best way to be spending your time, making a new city in the middle of a major war? That sounds very odd. It says 80 civilians and 150 soldiers were said to have gone to start the city. But in 100 years, they went from log cabins, which is pretty much all they should have been building in 1778, to this fair. Now, perhaps they did, but that really needs to be examined further as to how do you get all the material in the city? How do you quarry it? How do you transport it? How do you raise it? And we're just seeing one picture. If you actually look at pictures of the city of Louisville, I'm going to leave links below so you can see links to this exposition in the city of Louisville, their oldest buildings. Again, how do you build all this so quickly? How do you found such a thing? And remember, the word founded is really two combined words, right? Found and dead. Found, dead. And most U.S. cities were found dead in this period between 1700 and 1850. And even, I mean, Louisville is a strange story like all the other cities in the East, but once you start taking cities like Salt Lake City, supposedly founded by Mormon pioneers in 1850, right, or San Francisco by Gold Rush cowboys in 1847, that hopefully I'll be getting to in a few weeks, that they went from, in 20 years, cities that now have cathedrals and palaces and towers and domes that rival Cologne or Prague. But they started in the 1850s with cowboys and Mormon pioneers. I mean, those two cities are two of the greatest explosions on the historical narrative that we have. There's just no way that you could have gone from a bunch of cowboys building what you're going to see, as I show in the book and we'll show in later videos down the road. But I'm just taking you through Louisville and that story, just as the story of every North American city in the East, be it Toronto or Indianapolis, it doesn't matter. They're all just strange. And now we go to the next exposition, and this was the World Cotton Centennial that took place in New Orleans. And again, look at the size of the structure. This is, of course, a drawing of the event. But again, you're dealing with a massive building. You're dealing with a massive amount of garden work, are being included in this. And again, this is something that's all being built in the course of a year. And again, something that will soon be torn down. And in this photo, you're seeing that it's actually not a regular roof. It's a very glassed over roof. It was supposed to be providing a tremendous amount of light. So very similar to the Crystal Palaces that have been built in England, New York, in fact, all over the world. I think I found 10 Crystal Palaces, 12 Crystal Palaces, which all, of course, interestingly burned down. There was no Crystal Palace that didn't have a fire to burn it down. But this one took place in 1884, and it is known as the World Cotton Centennial. The U.S. Congress lent $1 million to the fair's directors in order to start it and to house exhibits. And it covered 249 acres, stretching from St. Charles Avenue to the Mississippi River. Supposedly, you could enter it by railway, steamboat, or even by ship. The main building, interestingly, the main building was exactly 33 acres. Oh, interesting number. And again, it was the largest roof structure at the time. It was also illuminated, and here's the same number, 5,000 electric lights. Remember, we heard 5,000 lights in Louisville, Kentucky? Well, exactly 5,000 lights are said to be putting in this structure. Yeah, so let's just look at a couple of photos of this, just so you can get a view of some of the surviving photographs of it. And again, this is supposed to be said to be built as a temporary structure. If you're going to build a temporary structure, if you're really going to build temporary, first of all, you'd build smaller than this, and you'd build more of them. You would build, they're just easier to build. There's less weight that you have to deal with. That's just logic, right? You would not try to build something like you're seeing here as a temporary structure with all of this kind of weight that's going to have to go down on what I'm sure doesn't have any kind of depth foundation to it. This is all just sitting structure on itself. You don't build something like that temporary. Here's another view of it. The size and the scale of this thing is massive. 1884 in New Orleans is building this. This is what you see, which is about the only thing that's left of it. Some of the gardens, I think, exist in this part of New Orleans, but there's very few of the original pieces that are left to the structure. A look inside, and you are seeing steel bracing, which would make sense. But it's quite possible that this was something that was rebuilt, redone, re-added, and this was, I think it's claimed the largest pipe organ in the world at the time. I'm not sure, but anyway, it's a massive organ. And another look at some of the exhibits that you're seeing here. Yeah. I do want to show this image, and this was the image that's being presented at the Cotton Centennial. And there's always this image of a female. I didn't post it up earlier, but I'll post it now as well. So this was the poster for the Louisville Fair. And again, you have this image of who will become the Statue of Liberty, right? The woman you're seeing represents Columbia, right? As I talk about in the book, who Columbia is, who the Statue of Liberty is. I don't want to go into too much detail here. But here in this image, she's greeting all of these people from somewhere else in the world. So why are you wanting at the New Orleans Cotton Festival to be presenting this particular concept of America? Notice it's all females that she's bringing in. There's no males in this group that's being greeted by Lady Liberty. But we're gonna and if you also notice, I'm looking very carefully. At the front, of course, is a white female, and the more you go back, sort of the darker and darker the people get, and that's another part, this dark part of this fair in New Orleans. Oh, this is the visitor's guide that you can see on Wikipedia that gives you, I think it's 60 pages of detail on this World Exposition in New Orleans. The picture you see here is a guy named G.M. Good, I think is his name. And the Smithsonian had a very strange exhibit at the New Orleans Fair. So I went to the Smithsonian website, because it's very dark what the Smithsonian had here. But what they have on their own site shows this guy. Oh, it's George Brown Good, G.B. Good, who is supposed to be the Smithsonian's representative, and this is what the website claims the Smithsonian was doing there. The website is claiming the Smithsonian's display comprised of a complete representative of all the species of fish known in North America and all the mammals north of Panama, coupled with a sizable display of American bird life and mineralogy. Financial and logistical constraints soon made it such a comprehensive study unrealistic, but participation in the New Orleans Exposition led Smithsonian officials to take this unusual opportunity to explore more distinct regions of the South and the West to yield even more species. So they're claiming that the Smithsonian wonderful exhibit here is only about birds and fish and minerals. And that's not true at all, because what they're really showing was a presentation of the races, and to show that all races were symbolic of a human lifespan, and that the blacks and the natives were at the child stage, while the whites were at the adult stage. They also set up comparisons of native skulls and the skulls of criminals, which were presented as very small and thus similar in comparison to the large skulls of white people that they had on display. Again, trying to show that white people have way more intelligence than others. The early fairs, they did exhibits on American blacks to show how good of agriculture and industrial workers they are, but not that there should be any kind of social equality in them. And what I want to finish with is a picture of where this leads, and this is an image from the book of the 1904 St. Louis Fair. So this would be very similar to the kind of thing you'd be seeing at this New Orleans Fair. But this is the front book of a book on anthropology that was part of the, like I say, of the exposition in 1904 in St. Louis. And I'm going to read what was written about this particular image. The photogravure herewith is from an excellent specially prepared drawing, which very accurately illustrates, as nearly as the science of ethnology is able to, the characteristic types of mankind arranged in a progressive order of development from primitive or prehistoric man to the highest example of modern civilization. The two central figures are symbolical, representing intelligence with the torch of enlightenment and the book of wisdom, invading the darksome cave in which ignorance skulks in companionship with the bird of evil omen and superstition. It is aspiration, lighting the dungeon of savagery and directing the race to better conditions, moral, intellectual, and social. That's pretty much summing up what these expositions were really all about. It sums up the attitude of the Western nations that have been building their society at that time, and of course, which is what really continues today. This image you're looking at, and again, we notice the darker the image, the further below they are on the scale. Then we have the Native Indian. Oh, then we come up to, I guess, the Asiatic. Then we come up to I guess the Middle East. Oh, we've had our first woman. I'm not sure what kind of image, what kind of background she has. And we end, of course, with the wonderful Victorian, perfect white-looking male. And then here's the woman with the lamp. And as you can see, that's the Statue of Liberty. You can't get any closer to see that that is the Statue of Liberty. And here are these darkened figures who are supposed to be the non-Victorian white World's Fair going individual. And are you beginning to see that the Statue of Liberty in the United States does not represent liberty at all? It doesn't represent the bringing of people to the United States. It represents superiority. It represents, and that's what these fairs are. That was a main part of what these fairs were doing, was presenting the superiority of those now in charge, who we might call the controllers. And the entire narrative, the entire historical narrative that we've come to believe was generated at these fairs and was presented at these fairs. So it's not just that they were, in a sense, writing the history. They were presenting the history they wanted the elite of society to know, and it would, of course, to be the elite of society who would become running the universities, running the schools, running everything, where the teaching of that history would move its way down the ladder to the people at the bottom there, huddled in the corner, who are going to hear whatever is in that book that the people in control want them to hear, want them to read, want them to know. So that takes us through, in 20 minutes, 2 fairs, and hopefully gives you some things to question on the structures, the size, the scale, the building qualifications, and of course the fact that these things were torn down and destroyed as soon as they were done. Why would you do that? That's just crazy. In the book I went in through, before that I talked about the fair in Barcelona and the very strange Barcelona hotel that had been built for that fair. I mentioned the building that had been built in Copenhagen for its fair in 1888, which that's a good one. Copenhagen they have their World's Fair in 1888, so they build the pavilion right opposite the Tivoli amusement park. As soon as the fair is over, they tear down the building and they build a new Rathaus. So if you're going to you're going to be building something that's going to last for a long time, the Rathaus, why wouldn't you just build the Rathaus in such a way that you could use it for the exposition, and then you don't have to tear it down and rebuild it, you just keep the same building? Wouldn't that make way more sense? So to me, it's quite obvious they didn't build that first building, the exposition building. They tore down something that was much older, pretended it had been built for the exposition, and then built a new structure on top of it. That's pretty obvious. And then the idea of that these are teaching tools, that the World's Fairs are historical creation events to present the narrative that wanted to be presented at that time, and that we have gone forward with in the last it's only 140 years, right? It's only been 140 years since these expositions in the 1880s. But that's the narrative we have been told, and that's the narrative that things like my book is attempting to destroy. And people like John Levy and the others who are digging into these kind of topics are trying to uncover what's the real story with our history, because it's obvious it's been manufactured. So I'll leave you with that video today on these two fairs. There's links below to if you want to read more about those particular fairs. And thanks again for joining, commenting, subscribing, picking up the books along the way, and sharing your knowledge with me at the same time. See you soon. Cheers.